UEFA turns on Infantino. How Europe killed FIFA's World Cup sell-off. Infantino has lost Europe. Why UEFA's revolt could end his FIFA presidency. Gianni Infantino wanted to transform the way FIFA made money from the World Cup. Instead, he may have triggered the revolt that ends his presidency. FIFA's president has abandoned a controversial proposal to transfer a minority stake in the commercial operations behind the World Cup and other FIFA competitions to private investors. The plan reportedly involved creating a new commercial subsidiary valued at approximately $20 billion, with outside investors acquiring as much as 20% of the business. The proposed company, known as FIFA Forward Enterprise, would have controlled or managed enormously valuable assets including broadcasting rights, sponsorship, licensing, ticketing, and hospitality. FIFA argued that the transaction could raise more than $4 billion and generate additional money for football development around the world. Europe saw something very different. UEFA and its 55 national associations unanimously rejected the proposal, threatened to withdraw from FIFA competitions, and accused the global governing body of trying to transfer ownership interests in football's greatest tournaments into private hands. Infantino has now withdrawn the plan. But UEFA has not simply accepted the retreat and moved on. European football's governing body says it has lost confidence in him. That is not ceremonial criticism. It is a declaration of political war. What was FIFA trying to sell? FIFA was not proposing to sell the World Cup trophy, the tournament name, or control of match results. The proposal was subtler and, in UEFA's view, potentially more dangerous. FIFA wanted to place the commercial rights attached to its competitions into a new enterprise. Private investors would then buy a minority stake in that company. This would effectively give outside capital a financial interest in the future earnings generated by the World Cup and other FIFA events. The investor group was reportedly expected to involve Thrive Capital, the investment company founded by Joshua Kushner, while JP Morgan was advising on the transaction. FIFA insisted that it would retain control over sporting decisions. Supporters of the proposal argued that private investment could improve commercial expertise, expand revenues, and provide national associations with more development money. But the crucial issue was not whether investors would be allowed to decide who played in the World Cup. It was the incentive their presence would create. A private investor does not purchase part of a business merely to preserve tradition. It expects growth and a financial return. That could create pressure for more matches, more tournaments, higher ticket prices, additional sponsorship categories, new broadcasting packages, and competition formats designed around commercial performance. UEFA feared that once investors acquired an ownership interest, reversing the process would become extremely difficult. Football's most important competition would remain officially governed by FIFA, but part of its economic machinery would answer to private capital. Why did UEFA oppose the plan so aggressively? UEFA's opposition was driven by several connected concerns. The World Cup is supposed to be held in trust. UEFA's central argument was that FIFA does not own the World Cup in the ordinary commercial sense. FIFA administers it on behalf of international football. The competition was built by national teams, players, supporters, and associations over generations. UEFA therefore rejected the idea that FIFA's current leadership should be able to package part of its future earnings and sell an ownership stake to investors. UEFA's formal statement said its 55 associations unanimously opposed transferring ownership interests in FIFA competitions into private hands. For UEFA, this was a question of custodianship. Infantino may be FIFA's elected president, but he is not the proprietor of world football. The process appeared secretive. The second concern was governance. Major associations and confederations complained that they had received insufficient information about a plan involving FIFA's most valuable assets. The proposal appeared to have been developed with bankers and prospective investors before football's principal stakeholders had been properly consulted. UEFA described the affair as part of a culture of secretive decision-making and called for greater accountability following the plan's collapse. That process mattered almost as much as the transaction itself. A transparent proposal, published in detail and subjected to months of independent scrutiny, would still have faced opposition. But presenting national associations with an advanced commercial structure and a compressed decision-making timetable created the impression that approval was being engineered rather than genuinely sought. Private investors could reshape the football calendar. European clubs already complain that players face an overloaded schedule. FIFA has expanded the Men's World Cup to 48 teams and introduced an enlarged Club World Cup. UEFA has itself expanded its major club competitions. Private ownership of tournament revenues could intensify that expansionary logic. An investor valuing FIFA's commercial operation at $20 billion would expect the asset to produce larger future cash flows. The most obvious ways to achieve that would be to sell more matches, create more premium fixtures, and extract more money from broadcasters, sponsors, and supporters. UEFA's objections, therefore, cannot be separated from the wider battle over who controls football's calendar. FIFA wants to expand its direct relationship with elite clubs and create more globally valuable competitions. UEFA wants to protect the primacy of the Champions League, the European Championship, and the domestic structures that feed them. There is principle involved, but also institutional self-interest. UEFA feared a permanent transfer of leverage. A minority stake can sound harmless, because FIFA would retain the majority. But minority shareholders often receive contractual protections, information rights, and influence over major business decisions. Even without formal control, investors could gain considerable leverage over commercial strategy. They might also become entitled to a share of revenues generated decades into the future. UEFA's fear was that FIFA would receive a large amount of money immediately, distribute some of it to national associations, and leave future generations of football administrators bound to a commercial arrangement they did not negotiate. It was, in effect, an argument against selling tomorrow's income to finance today's political promises. Why is UEFA so powerful? On paper, UEFA is only one of FIFA's 6 continental confederations. FIFA has 211 member associations, while UEFA represents 55. Europe, therefore, cannot normally dictate FIFA policy through votes alone. But football power is not distributed equally. UEFA's influence comes from the economic, sporting, and political importance of European football. Europe controls the strongest national teams. Most of the world's deepest national squads are European. England, France, Spain, Germany, Italy, Portugal, the Netherlands, Croatia, and numerous other UEFA members provide much of the competitive and commercial appeal of a World Cup. A tournament without European participation would still technically be a FIFA World Cup. Commercially, however, it would be devastated. Broadcasters purchase World Cup rights partly because hundreds of millions of viewers want to watch Europe's leading teams and its internationally recognized players. UEFA therefore possessed a weapon more powerful than a congressional vote: withdrawal. When its associations threatened not to participate in FIFA competitions, the financial assumptions behind the proposed company became impossible to defend. Why would investors pay billions for a share of World Cup revenues if Europe might refuse to enter the tournament? UEFA did not need to defeat Infantino in a conventional ballot. It merely had to make the asset he wanted to sell uninvestable. Europe is the center of the club game. The world's most commercially important clubs overwhelmingly play in European competitions. Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Bayern Munich, Paris Saint-Germain, Inter Milan, and the rest of Europe's elite dominate global club audiences. The leading players from South America, Africa, Asia, and North America also tend to spend the decisive years of their careers in European leagues. That gives UEFA influence extending far beyond its geographic membership. It governs the ecosystem in which most of international football's biggest stars work. FIFA can organize the World Cup, but UEFA controls the Champions League and the European club structure that produces much of the tournament's commercial value. UEFA has enormous financial resources. UEFA recorded approximately €5 billion in revenue during 2024 to 2025. Its senior men's club competitions accounted for 88% of that total. The Champions League, Europa League, Conference League, and Super Cup generated gross revenue of roughly €4.4 billion, with around €3.3 billion distributed to participating clubs. UEFA's 2025 to 2026 budget projected revenue exceeding €5.2 billion and more than €4 billion in distributions to participating teams. This means UEFA is not a regional administrator dependent on FIFA's generosity. It is a commercial superpower in its own right. Its ability to distribute billions to clubs and associations creates loyalty, dependence, and political influence. UEFA can coordinate powerful governments and associations. UEFA's 55 members include some of the oldest, richest, and most institutionally sophisticated football associations in the world. The English FA, German DFB, Spanish Federation, French Federation, and Italian Federation are not marginal FIFA members. Together, they represent enormous broadcasting markets, powerful leagues, major sponsors, and governments willing to intervene when football becomes politically sensitive. A threat from one association may be manageable. A unanimous European front is different. It signals to broadcasters, sponsors, investors, and governments that FIFA could face a coordinated challenge across its most valuable markets. FIFA cannot easily replace Europe. Infantino has built much of his political strength by appealing to smaller associations outside Europe. FIFA's one country, one vote system means a small island association formally has the same presidential vote as Germany or Brazil. Development funding is consequently central to FIFA politics. Every one of FIFA's 211 associations can receive money through the FIFA Forward program, and FIFA says approximately $2.8 billion was made available across its first two funding cycles. That has helped Infantino build a broad electoral coalition. But votes and commercial value are not the same thing. Smaller associations may help elect a FIFA president. They cannot replace the television audience, sponsorship income, players, and tournament credibility supplied by Europe. That is the contradiction at the heart of FIFA governance. Infantino may possess the votes. UEFA possesses much of the product. Is UEFA defending supporters or protecting its own empire? UEFA's objections deserve to be taken seriously, but the organization is not a disinterested guardian standing outside football's commercial system. UEFA has aggressively expanded and monetized its own competitions. The Champions League format has grown. European football generates billions from broadcasters and sponsors. UEFA exercises extensive regulatory power over clubs and distributes money through a system that reinforces the strategic importance of its competitions. Its opposition to FIFA, therefore, contains two motives. The first is genuine concern about private ownership, opaque governance, and the commodification of the World Cup. The second is a desire to stop FIFA from building a commercial structure capable of competing more directly with UEFA. If FIFA created a $20 billion tournament enterprise backed by sophisticated investors, it could potentially expand the Club World Cup, develop new competitions, and challenge UEFA for control of elite club football. UEFA was defending the World Cup. It was also defending the Champions League. Those motives are not mutually exclusive. An institution can act in the wider interests of football while simultaneously protecting its own power. Why scrapping the plan has not saved Infantino. Infantino's retreat stopped the immediate confrontation, but it confirmed UEFA's underlying point. Sufficient collective pressure could force FIFA's president to reverse one of his flagship proposals. The episode also exposed fractures inside FIFA. Senior advisor Carlos Cordero resigned after opposing the transaction, while other internal figures reportedly criticized the process. Opposition also spread beyond Europe, with CONCACAF and the Asian Football Confederation raising concerns or aligning themselves against the plan. This matters because Infantino's authority has often rested on an appearance of inevitability. He presents FIFA as financially successful, globally expansive, and politically united behind his leadership. The abandoned sell-off produced the opposite image. It showed a president advancing a transformative plan without securing support from critical stakeholders, underestimating the opposition, and then retreating when faced with a credible boycott. UEFA is now demanding structural reform rather than accepting the withdrawal as sufficient. That leaves Infantino confronting several uncomfortable questions. Who authorized the negotiations? How advanced were discussions with investors? What commitments had been made? Why were major confederations not consulted earlier? What fees were paid to banks and advisors? And why should the same leadership that designed the proposal be trusted to investigate its failure? Could UEFA remove Infantino? Not by itself. FIFA presidents are elected by the organization's member associations, and Europe controls only 55% of the 211 votes. Infantino has historically maintained strong support across Africa, Asia, Oceania, and parts of the Americas, partly because FIFA distributes substantial development funding to smaller associations. A formal UEFA declaration of no confidence does not automatically remove him, but it can destroy the assumption that he will face no serious opponent. The next FIFA presidential election is expected in 2027. Potential challengers would need to determine whether UEFA's rebellion can be combined with dissatisfaction elsewhere into a winning coalition. UEFA alone cannot elect a new president. It can provide the money, legitimacy, organizational machinery, and initial voting bloc needed to make a challenge credible. That is why the phrase "lost confidence" is so consequential. It tells potential candidates, sponsors, and other confederations that Europe is open to replacing Infantino. The wider geopolitical struggle. The dispute also reflects a broader shift in football's balance of power. European institutions still dominate the club game, but FIFA increasingly presents itself as the champion of football outside Europe. Infantino can argue that UEFA already controls the richest competitions, and that new FIFA revenues would allow more money to reach developing football nations. From that perspective, European opposition may appear self-serving, wealthy associations protecting their existing commercial dominance, while denying FIFA a mechanism to increase global investment. UEFA's answer is that development funding cannot justify privatizing part of football's common inheritance, or bypassing proper governance. Both arguments contain truth. The developing world deserves a greater share of football's revenues. But that does not mean national associations should be encouraged to approve an opaque transaction by offering them large, immediate distributions. The risk is that development funding becomes a political inducement. Accept the commercial transformation now, receive the money, and leave the long-term consequences to future administrations. Infantino's greatest miscalculation. Infantino appears to have misunderstood the source of UEFA's power. Europe does not dominate FIFA simply because it can win internal votes. Often, it cannot. It dominates because FIFA's most valuable competition cannot function normally without European teams, European audiences, and players employed by European clubs. UEFA's threatened boycott attacked the transaction at its weakest point. The sell-off depended on a $20 billion valuation. That valuation depended on predictable future revenues. Those revenues depended on the World Cup retaining its best teams and worldwide audience. The moment UEFA made participation uncertain, the valuation became uncertain too. Infantino could have attempted to force the plan through FIFA's voting structure. But investors do not purchase constitutional voting majorities. They purchase dependable cash flows. UEFA made those cash flows look anything but dependable. A victory, but not the end of the war. The immediate result is a clear UEFA victory. The World Cup commercial sell-off has been abandoned. Private investors will not receive the proposed stake. European associations demonstrated that a coordinated withdrawal threat can overpower FIFA's formal leadership. But the underlying conflict remains. FIFA wants more control over elite club football, more competitions, and more revenue independent of UEFA. UEFA wants to contain FIFA's expansion while preserving Europe's dominant position. National associations outside Europe want larger development payments. Clubs want more money, but complain about excessive matches. Broadcasters want premium content. Investors see an industry containing extraordinary global demand, but governance structures that still resemble sporting associations rather than conventional corporations. The sell-off proposal collapsed because Infantino attempted to resolve those tensions through a financial transaction without first resolving the political question beneath it. Who actually owns world football? FIFA may administer the World Cup. UEFA may supply many of its strongest teams and biggest markets. Private investors may believe its future revenue can be valued and traded. But UEFA's revolt delivered a blunt answer. The tournament does not belong to FIFA's president, its bankers, or a consortium of investors. And when Europe acts collectively, even the most powerful man in world football can be forced to retreat.